Hi everyone! As a response to a lot of requests that I got concerning mixing videos, today I'm going to do the first one. I'm going to take you through a drum mix that I will make in front of the camera. And it's a song that I recorded a year ago for a singer called Jens Gillis. I recorded the drums, and I'm not actually mixing this record, but if I was mixing the drums, this is what I would do. So join me and let's see what happens. Alright, so this is the Logic session. As you can see, all of the drum tracks are empty. They're all at 0 dB, except for this one, which I'm probably not going to use, but just for showing you, I'm going to level that as well now. As you can see, we've got overhead left and right, hi-hat, snare top and bottom, a Wurst mic, kick in, kick out, sub kick, a high tom, a rack tom, and a floor tom. We've got a room mic. Let's call this room. And this is my clap device. All right, let's go to English for this. And yeah, so it's these mics and a couple of percussion overdubs. So let's start by listening to the overheads by themselves. Hi-hat. Next up we have snare top. Snare bottom. The Wurst. Kick in. Sub kick. High tom. Low tom. A room mic. And then the clap device. Sorry, I just keep turning soloing and muting channels, and then you can't hear me anymore. I have to get used to it. Clap device. In case you're wondering, this is just a dynamic mic that's on the device itself. All right, now for mixing. The first thing I usually do is, you know, in Logic you have this function to enlarge everything slightly. So I zoom in to a snare hit and I check the phase. And in this case, you can see that the hi-hat has opposite phase than the overheads, and the snare is also going up when the overheads are going down. Snare top and bottom is always the other way around. So in this case, I would flip the phase on the snare top and Wurst mic. So let's go ahead and do that. And then copy it over to Wurst. All right, and then what I do next is usually get some basic leveling done. So first I remove mics like the Wurst that are kind of effect mics. Also turn down the room quite a bit. Hi-hat usually snare bottom. And use this as a starting point. So let's take a listen. All right, so next let's start by EQing the individual tracks. First the overheads. On overheads I want a little bit of room, but mostly cymbals. So let's choose the Logic EQ. By the way, I use Logic stock plugins exclusively, except for this Isotope RX10 thing on my voice, which denoises everything. If I turn it off, it's quite a lot of noise. Like that, it's okay. So overhead. And what I do here is look for frequencies that annoy me or that I find, you know, are very present and more present than I want them to be. And this snare was a piccolo snare. It has a lot of resonance in like the mid frequencies. So let's remove some of that. And then the rest is a little bit of cymbal boost, around 10K maybe. So let's use this as a starting point, and then I'm going to copy that to the right overhead and just quickly double check that it works on this channel as well. Sounds good. All right, let's pan them. In this case, actually, let's go all the way, left and right. Next up, hi-hat. On the hi-hat, I usually just want the high frequencies, so I'm going to do a cut at maybe 1.5K. Sounds like a hi-hat. And then I've got the habit of boosting like, I don't know, 13, 14K, like that. And then let's see how, let's see how it blends in with the overheads. Okay, good for now. Next up, snare top. Again, EQing. I always do a low cut just below the fundamental. So let's see where that is. About there. Then I'm going to boost the fundamental. And then again, in the mids, we have the same bit of muddiness, which I actually like because it gives the snare kind of a bark. So I'm not going to remove too much of it. And then snare top, I always boost 7.2K because Andrew Sheps does it and he knows what to do. All right, compression is going to be next. No, actually, let's do compression right now. Compressor, I've made this preset for myself, which works very well with drums. Attack around 30 milliseconds, and then the release for snare top I like at 150, maybe about a 4:1 ratio. Let's see how it acts. Yeah, I like it to go right up to here. And in this case, I've got the vintage FET compressor because I figured it would fit for this sound, which is a modern sound, but not overproduced. I want it to sound organic still. So let's use that compressor. All right, next up, snare bottom. On snare bottom, I always do a low cut, maybe like that, pretty extreme. And then I always boost around 6K. So let's see what that does. Now let's see how it blends in with the snare top. Sounds pretty good. Let's skip the worst for now and continue with kick. For kick, I usually try to find the fundamental, which should be around 50 to 60 hertz. I'd prefer 60, but in this case, might also be 50, I don't know. And then I like to remove some stuff around here, like 100 hertz. Mids are usually not a problem with kicks for me. I think it gives them a little bit of character, which can sometimes be cool. And then you can boost around 3 to 6K depending on what kind of attack you want. This would be more of a poppy attack, and this is like a metal attack is around 6K. So for this, let's go at 3K maybe. But let's listen first. As you can see, there is a big bit of muddiness here, low mids, which in a kick mic is always present, but I don't like it. So let's remove that. I now removed it until I saw that the wave was equally high to the fundamental of the drum, which we can now slightly boost, or we can choose to use the sub kick for that, which in this case is what I'm going to do. Let's also do like a little bit of 3K. Okay. And then let's copy this compressor over to the kick drum. And let's increase the release a little bit. And that's pretty much all that's necessary, I think. A lot of this stuff is also by looking. You know, I like the needle to move about this much for like normal amounts of compression. Anything above that is like medium or heavy compression to me. So next, the sub kick. In this case, I want to have nothing but fundamental, because that's what's lacking in the in mic. This is attack, this is tone, fundamental tone. So let's do a high cut all the way down to this area. So let's try to find the 60 hertz. In this case, you can see that the fundamental is actually around 80 hertz, which I don't want. So I'm going to remove everything until the only thing that's left is in this region. And then let's turn it up. So this kind of EQ might seem odd, but with these two mics combined, it should make sense. All right. Further adjustments will be made in the near future. Okay, let's go to a few tom hits. I think I've got a few here. Yes. Not a lot of toms in this song. Okay. That's what they sound like on their own. So with toms, I like to find the fundamental. Oops. And then cut everything below that, and then cut the first overtone, which is always a bit higher than the fundamental. And on the floor toms, I like to boost the fundamental because they always have less fundamental volume. And if I do that, all that's left to do is adjust the attack around 6K. And that's pretty much it. So let's do this on the first tom. And then let's just copy that over. And all we have to do for the floor tom now is adjust the frequencies and boost the fundamental. And now they fit together very nicely. Also, one thing I always do is use a multimeter on the master fader. So so I can make sure that the toms are equally loud with their fundamentals. So let's quickly check that. Okay, the floor tom is actually a bit louder now. Might have overdone it slightly. Let's check again. All right, good enough. Again, compression. That's all I do. So a little bit longer release for a tom, which has sustain, but the rest stays the same. And then I make sure that the needle doesn't move more than this for a loud hit, this much. Okay. Next, I'm going to copy this to the floor tom and quickly check. All right, fine. Before I pan them, I'm going to continue with the room mic and do like a rough mix and then do the panning later, because I find it easier to level everything when it's not panned yet. So let's check the room. For that, let's go back to maybe this part. Okay. This room sounds pretty neutral, except it's got a lot of mids, which I actually like because it gives the snare a lot of character. So I'm going to try to remove as little mids as possible and then basically be done with it. Let's keep it at that. And I use the room, in this case, it's a mono room. I use it as basically in order to collect a kind of neutral sounding mix of the whole kit, which I can then send to a stereo reverb plugin and create an artificial room that way, because that way I'm very flexible for mixing and I don't need to have a very well treated and acoustically perfect room. It also makes it easier when you have different sounds you want. You can't always change the size of the room you record in. It's very difficult. So this makes it easier to have kind of a dry room and then do the sizing later on in processing. So the plugin I like for this stuff recently transitioned from using the Snare Reverb, which is kind of a basic reverb plugin, to using the Space Designer, which sounds a little bit more studio-like and a little bit more high quality to me. So I go to Space Designer and then mono to stereo. Then I like to start at a preset. Let's go to medium spaces and room. And then let's choose any of these, maybe. Yeah, let's just take this ambience. Okay, that's actually way too long for me. Maybe let's check this. Yeah, I like this one. It sounds natural. Doesn't sound like reverb. And blended in like that, it almost sounds like a studio. Like a studio room. Okay, lastly, I'm gonna take a look at the clap device. So for this, I don't really want it to sound that natural. I just want it to resemble a clap. So obviously I'm gonna cut everything that's not claps. So maybe like that. Then I'm gonna boost some of these higher mids. It sounds pretty good to me. Okay. Now, before using like a Snare Reverb plugin, I'm gonna listen to the whole drum mix now and find out what the levels need to be. So I'm gonna go to this spot because there are toms in it. Let's take a listen, and I'll make some adjustments along the way. As you just saw, I use the multimeter because I like to use analyzers in order to make sure that the fundamentals of the kick, snare, and toms are in the same dynamic range. So they all were around this level. The toms are a bit louder, but it's okay because they only appear rarely at all. So when they appear, I want them to be slightly more present than the rest. So now, actually, I already like this mix the way it is. Everything seems to be pretty present in there. Next up, I'm going to do the snare reverb thing. So let's select these and then create a send. Let's name this snare verb. It'll appear here, and let's send some signal in it, and let's send the bus to the drum bus. One thing I like to do in order to keep things simple and coherent is copy or use the same reverb plugin. So in this case, of course, we want the dry signal to be all the way gone. But this way it sounds kind of natural. Okay, let me make some more adjustments. This left crash is a bit louder than the one on the right, so that's why I turned this down. Okay, let's quickly check the clap thing. Okay, that's a bit low, so let's compress it. And then I'm also going to send that to the Snare Reverb bus. Now I'm going to start panning. So this is going to go to the left, rack tom a little bit to the left, floor tom a lot to the right. Okay, and now I'm going to compress this mix on the drum bus. Again, using my preset. In this case, I'm using quite a lot of compression. Yeah, because I like the way it sounds. Next up, I'm going to do a trick of mine, and that is to simulate a little bit of a tape machine. So I'm going to use this distortion plugin, and in between the distortion and the compressor, I'm going to use a gain plugin. So I'm going to turn down this gain here. First, let's listen to what happens if I just put the distortion plugin on. Generally, I like to adjust this thing to match the volume when it's off. So that's why you saw me do this and match the volume. But even with the drive turned all the way down, it's still a bit too crunchy for my liking. So that's why I put this in. So I'm gonna maybe subtract 3.5 decibels. That sounds good. And one thing I like to do as well is to look at the level meter and make sure that the kick and snare are equally loud, which the distortion obviously helps with that. Okay, now compared to the snare, and especially the resonance in the mids of the snare, I think the kick now has a little bit too little bass, so I'm going to boost that slightly. And one thing that also happens when you use distortion is you get some artificial low end, so that's why I'm going to do another low cut here. Yeah, this is a playback that I play to. It's anything but final, but yeah. Snare fundamental could also be a little bit more present. So I'm gonna choose another EQ on the snare top channel and boost it. The reason I do this instead of doing it before the compressor is because the compressor is going to take it down. because the fundamental is what triggers the compressor the most. So I prefer to use an EQ after the compressor. Okay, and I think that's about it. Maybe let's take a look at the Wurst and just see if that would add anything useful to this drum mix. Honestly, I don't really feel like you need this mic. I just turned it up because it's there, but it wouldn't really make the difference in the end. But I think that about does it for this drum mixing tutorial number 1. I think it goes to show that you can do a lot of stuff with Logic internal plugins, or generally internal plugins, because I used Studio One before transitioning to Logic, and it was the same thing. So if you know what sound you want, and if you've got good signals to work with, you should be able to get great mixes with stock plugins. One thing about stock plugins, of course, is that they, or maybe let's say the other way around. One thing about external plugins is that they can trigger your creativity a little bit more. They might be easier to use in a creative process, but in this case, mixing to me isn't that creative of a process. It's more, how can I make an existing thing sound the best? How can I get the most out of what's already there? So yeah, that's why stock plugins are fine for what I'm doing. Yeah, I don't think I've forgotten anything. If you liked this video, please consider subscribing, because I might do more. Maybe you can also comment if you want to see some specific information on, like maybe a reverb or maybe an art of drumming mix that I did. This was just supposed to be like a baseline for more mixing videos that might appear in the future. All right, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If you learned something along the way, or if you have questions, please comment below. And also tell me if you want to see more of these videos, and maybe also concerning more specific topics, like maybe the mixing video on reverb, on distortion, tape simulation, whatever it might be. I would be happy to do more of them. So see you next time.